like Israel, Taiwan, South Korea, pretty much united in their countries. They accept that there's a threat.
I think service doesn't always have to be fighting on the front lines. It doesn't always have to be going out to wars and, risking your life for civilian casualty. It just means serving your country, and you could be an engineer serving the country. You could be a medical.
Very rapidly, America has gone away from the days, the whole world really, but America specifically has gone away from the days of large ground-based assaults. Now we're relying more on drones, missiles, all that stuff.
That's great, yeah. But I think having a federal program sort of sets a precedent that the American government is actually engaged in the welfare of its citizens.
My other contention for this area of discussion is that the military specifically doesn't want or need millions of conscripts. They've repeatedly said,
risking the lives of everyday Americans, we don't have to send them into active combat. That's up to you. We just want you to be serving the country, and that could be community service as well, which is obviously not really risky, and it helps people a lot. All right, welcome in, everyone. Today is our second episode of our Debate Hour podcast. Today's resolution is going to be about whether national service ought to be mandatory. This is the current Lincoln-Douglas resolution for the NSDA, and we thought this would be a really fun resolution to debate. So stick in with us. We're going to bring up a lot of great points. So I'm going to be switching roles and playing the AF today. Jake is going to be playing the neg. I'll be arguing that national service actually ought to be mandatory, whereas Jake will be arguing that it doesn't. Or it shouldn't be mandatory. Just get ready to see some great points. So as usual, we're going to be having three areas of discussion. Our first one is going to be about how national service impacts society and the nation. I'll be arguing that it obviously impacts society in a very positive manner, whereas Jake will be arguing that it impacts society in a negative manner. So, I have several points that I want to bring up in this area of debate. The first one is that United States political efficacy and political participation is at an all-time low. Americans have a very low faith in the government right now. In fact, a Pew Research poll found that only 16% of Americans in 2020 have faith in the government. This becomes a big issue because of the influence of special interests, of course, because of politicians that don't stick to their words. Whatever that might be, U.S. civic health is declining, and it's especially declining among the youth. However, Brookings and Service Airlines argues that large-scale national service actually re-incentivizes Americans to take part in the political process and also have faith in their legislators and their government, because it instills a sense of patriotism. When Americans are more patriotic, of course, they're going to have more faith in their legislature and their government. National service is, quote, needed in America now, according to Service Airlines, specifically to address civic decay and rebuild America's civic fabric. Another Brookings piece explicitly proposes that universal national service can actually, quote, limit toxic tribalism, social division, by creating structured opportunities for cross-group cooperation. So as more and more people get involved in the military and other forms of national service, people become more cooperative in general, and people will tend to want to cooperate with the other side of the political aisle on issues that actually affect Americans. And this obviously leads to a myriad of positive impacts. We can talk about this under the general premise of democratic stability, whereas if we don't fix civic trust, policy solutions degrade, and more people do not know exactly who to elect. More and more people get disengaged with the political process. That obviously creates a very bad problem. So national service basically targets the entire root of that cause, which is civic decay. Another thing is that national service reduces social fragmentation by forcing meaningful interaction along many diverse demographics. In fact, a 2020 paper on Israel's compulsory service, because of many countries, Israel is one of them that does have compulsory service, they found that IDF service reshapes attitudes towards security threats and outgroups. And more people who are actually involved in their political process and their military actually become more energized and more patriotic towards the Israeli cause. And other further research on Israel's units showed that diversity in institutions reduces prejudice in their military army, and structured equal status cooperation between many different diverse groups of people and demographics, whether that be males and females or the Jews and Arabs who are serving in the army simultaneously, that changes attitudes towards a shared cause. And it's a very psychologically valid point, because when we tend to be in contact with more people, we tend to be more cooperative, and we tend to have sort of common goals, shared status. We're all sort of fighting for a root cause, and that root cause is obviously the stability and the civic greatness of a country. So when everyone has common goals, people tend to be more patriotic, and society tends to be less rigid and more shared towards something that can actually help serve all people. So yeah, that is the first set of points that I wanted to bring up. Jake, if you would like to respond.
Yeah, you talked a lot about political efficacy being fixed by mandatory service, with your example of Israel. You talked about mandatory service could increase patriotism, but I don't think that would work in America to the extent that it's worked in other places. Like in South Korea, they've got mandatory service, and I believe Japan does, and Israel does. But they are all countries under a significant immediate next door threat. Like the Israelis are surrounded by hostile Arab nations. South Korea is surrounded by borders North Korea, which is hostile, and is very nearby to China, which is hostile. Same with Japan and Taiwan. So these countries that are surrounded by hostile neighbors, the mandatory service helps because people feel like they're fighting something that matters, that is a immediate threat that feels like they're protecting their country. America, we obviously have threats around the globe, and we have enemies around the globe, but we don't have immediate threats on our borders in terms of a nation. So I don't think that it would create the same united effect, because if we can't agree on where we should send our military, that's a very divisive topic in America. People are definitely not going to agree more if we're forcing people to go to these wars that they don't want to fight. That doesn't seem like it's necessarily an immediate threat for America. Whereas in these other countries that have conscription, like Israel, Taiwan, South Korea, pretty much united in their countries. They accept that there's a threat, whether or not the threat is justified or they're justified in fighting back. That's what they argue about, but pretty much they universally agree that there is a threat. And so they have a kind of a united sense that the military is acceptable.
All right, yeah. I do want to respond to that. A country that does have unilateral national service is Switzerland. They don't have any hostile neighbors. In fact, they're surrounded by a bunch of allies or countries that are neutral. Another country would be Finland, which you could argue Russia is hostile, but they're not really in any geopolitical threat to Finland right now, because Finland is, I believe, part of NATO. So I think service doesn't always have to be fighting on the front lines. It doesn't always have to be going out to wars and, risking your life for civilian casualty. It just means serving your country. And you could be an engineer serving the country. You could be a medical professional serving the country. You could be an architect serving the country, too. I think these are all forms in which you could be.
But the national service refers to military, no?
Does it?
Yeah. That's what I found, at least.
Okay. Yeah, depending on the definition of national service. But I feel like many people in the army, they don't necessarily work as front lines. I guess if we're arguing that you should be fighting on the front lines, I guess that depends a lot. That hinges a lot on what conflicts you're currently engaged in. But yeah, I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be dependent on another threat. Like I mentioned with those European examples, I think all it does is it sort of creates this shared cause that even if you don't have a common enemy, you just want to serve your country in whatever way is right. And this patriotism, like I mentioned, it reaps a myriad of beneficial causes. It restores public trust in the government. It restores, these demographic shifts, the diversity of thoughts and diversity of opinions. It sort of creates a shared environment of that. And another point that I did want to bring up is that, national service, it stabilizes recruitment, and it produces a lot of disaster responders too. As we know that the United States has a lot of natural disasters that it has to respond to, like hurricanes, for example, which occur almost every year. National service, it sort of produces a lot of people who can go to the front lines and respond to these disasters, and also a lot of health workers. And these are all things in which national service incentivizes, whereas otherwise we might have a shortage of. And it also increases deterrence, reduces vulnerability to natural and man-made crises. So if there's ever a situation where we are at the brink of any sort of regional or national collapse, you will have a huge army, or at least a man-made coalition that can respond to that in an adequate manner. And generally, when you have more people, you're more suited to respond to whatever threat might be at the doorstep. It might not always be a hostile nation. It could be a domestic threat. It could also be a natural disaster, something that isn't even human-made.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and that kind of leads into one of the arguments that I was going to bring up, and it's that contrary to what a lot of people believe, mandatory national service would actually harm the military. It would actually make it harder for the military to respond to threats, both foreign and domestic, including natural disasters. And the Department of Defense itself has actually said repeatedly that conscription is a bad idea, in congressional hearings and whatnot, because forcing conscription lowers the standards for enlistment. Right now, on an all-volunteer based military, the DoD can pick only the qualified and the best recruits. Obviously, there are outliers in that, and it's not perfect, but generally speaking, we pick the most qualified that we can get. And if we switch to conscription, the DoD can no longer be selective, and it will become extremely bloated with unqualified and underqualified conscripts. Because right now, you're just completely unqualified to be in the military, and you go and try and get in, they won't let you in. If we force conscription, that means they have to let you in, and it becomes so bloated that it can't maneuver well. And the people who are actually qualified won't get the resources and the help and just the backing that they need to succeed in the military. And it shows. According to the Hoover Institute, only 23% of people aged 17 to 25 are eligible to enlist in the military without a waiver. High school dropouts, mental health challenges, drug use, criminal records, obesity, and medical issues have all had an impact on the pool of eligible recruits. That's from the Hoover Institute. That's not even saying 23% of applicants are okay to get in. That's just 23% of all people aged 17 to 25 are actually eligible to get in. So if we're forcing 100% of people to go into the military, I mean, do the math there. That's the vast majority of people are not qualified, and they shouldn't be in the military. So it's only going to make the military worse, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and it'd be crazy. Some estimates put it over $100 billion a year increase to the budget just to have conscription, and that's almost a fifth of the current budget.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is going to be a lot of people that you have to actually account for. However, a Defense Department official testified in 2023 that services collectively missed recruiting goals every year by about 41,000 people in 2023, which was one of the greatest recruiting challenges since the draft ended in 1973 for the Vietnam War. That's a huge challenge. So right now we're at a very significant low in people who actually want to enlist for the Army. And 2025 reporting confirms that, in fact, it's even greater right now. That was 2023 data. Right now it's even more. And notes that the Army also cut force size by 24,000 positions because there's a lack of people wanting to serve in the military. So in reality, we are actually really underserved, and very few people actually want to go out there and serve in the military, whether that be in the front lines. Also, I did sort of want to clarify definition of national service. I did look it up, and national service can also entail the people who are not necessarily in the front lines. So that also includes a lot of people who might not be fit for combat, like how you were mentioning that there's a lot of people who they'll have to lower the fitness standards and things like that. The people who can't necessarily meet the fitness standards that are set in place already, I don't think we should, make the fitness standards lower or greater. That poses a myriad of threats in its own. But I think the people who can't fit that standard, they should be serving as something that they could actually do. And it depends on really what you do. We would have to look at the specific policy implementations in countries that have very successfully implemented them, like Singapore or Switzerland or Israel, South Korea, these countries that actually have a long-standing program of mandatory national service. But I'm sure there's a myriad of ways in which you can involve yourself. Additionally, service can also include community service, which is another caveat of the definition. And a longitudinal study found that adolescents who regularly volunteer and participate civically, they have significantly higher adult civic engagement and voting rates. So going back to my very first point, which was about political efficacy, the more and more we train youth, age 17 to 25, to actually be involved in their community, whether that be serving the country or that might be, just community service in their local communities, that would reap a myriad of benefits as more and more people would vote, more and more people would stay involved, more and more people would have faith. These things are obviously good for a democratic institution. You want more political participation, you want more diversity of thought. And a 2022 study found that participating as a Teach for America, which is a civic national service program, a Teach for America instructor, has a large positive effect on youth voter turnout. So if we're just thinking about civic engagement, it's pretty imperative that we engage or we enforce that youth or young people involve themselves in community service or national service. And again, national service, it depends on the definition that you're going to be using. Hopefully in your guys' rounds you have a fixed definition. National service can include obviously combat, but it can also include other things. Like I just showed, it could also include community service. But yeah, as talking about, Jake's point about, we have a budgeting issue. That's obviously true. And I think this would obviously need a huge expansion to our current Department of Defense budget. And I think a lot of people, when they're against defense spending, they're against where exactly does that spending go. And if it's going towards them and a shared cause of, helping better communities through disaster relief and community service and things like that, I think a lot more people would be okay with high defense spending because it's more of a social endeavor rather than something for, the war on terror, which is obviously very unpopular right now among many of America's youth.
Yeah, so responding to kind of the three points you mentioned there. In terms of enlistment being low in the military, I don't have them here, but I've seen numbers that would suggest otherwise, that the trend has been reversed in 2025 or is working towards being reversed. But a lot of it is, depending on the area of military, it's not really a problem of not enough people trying to join the military. It's more a problem of people who are trying to get in not reaching eligibility. And so there are certain areas where they just don't have enough people signing up. But then a lot of it is just people not reaching the eligibility. And as we'll talk about in the third area of discussion later on, there's strategic value in the military downsizing currently, which that's some of it as well. And yes, to your other point, a lot of military members are not soldiers on the front lines, but so they may not have to go through the same fitness goals, and they don't have to reach the same fitness goals. They don't have to do all the same requirements. But if you're an engineer or you are serving on an aircraft carrier as a tech for one of the airplanes, or even if you're just serving at an airfield, you still have requirements that you need to meet. You still need to have certain fitness goals. You still need to have a lot of other specifications that you need to fill. And so Yeah, the fact that they're not all frontline soldiers helps the bloated of underqualified and unqualified people. That helps the issue, but it doesn't negate it fully. And I think it's still a very significant issue despite that. And then what was your third thing you said you're talking about?
Oh, about how
Uh,
it produces lifelong civic participation.
oh, yeah, I can concede that. I
Yeah.
can concede that.
Right.
I don't really have notes to refute that. Um, yeah, if you want to respond to what I said, I have another argument that I want to pivot to, but
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
let you
Yeah.
respond
Before you get
first.
to that argument, about like fitness goals, I think it's actually really good for America's youth to be incentivized to actually improve their physical fitness. And if it's like an engineer who has a specific physical fitness or maybe academic fitness, what that might be, there's a huge benefit in forcing people to actually work hard and reach those goals if they're not unreasonable. And obviously, a lot of like the front lines fitness goals could be unreasonable for the average American, but maybe some of the other fitness goals I don't really know what the fitness goals are for many of these specific roles like cooks or, you know, engineers. But I think it's a good thing that we incentivize America's youth to be physically working hard so that they can enlist in the army. And if they can't, there's obviously going to be something else. There's going to have to be a breakaway option because in every country that has done it, there's obviously going to be people who don't reach that fitness goal. I think that's almost guaranteed. And for those people, there should be an option that allows them to sort of still engage in civic service, but maybe not in conventional ways.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just fitness as well. There's also intelligence and
Right, of
other
course, yeah.
logic tests that you need to do and score high on. But yeah, I can see how it would be helpful to the youth to be forced to reach certain military expectations. But that's not the point of the military, and there are other ways that you can incentivize youth to work on fitness goals,
Such
work on
as?
other goals, schooling, Boy Scouts,
Yeah.
other things. With the amount of money that it would cost put into the military to include conscription and get people up to these goals and these standards, you could put in a fraction of that money into promoting other programs that would achieve a lot of the same effect. Obviously, you're not other programs where you're not physically forcing people to go into the military or into other national service things. That you're not going to get the same result because you can't. Other than that, you're not forcing 100% of all young people to go into something.
Hmm.
So you're not going to get the same result, but you would get a significantly better result.
Yeah, but what we've seen
I'd
time
rather
after
see.
time is that, like, for example, in the status quo, where people do not, or people aren't necessarily required to join, youth enrichment programs like Boy Scouts, or, every school has certain fitness goals. We still see a lot of pervasive problems in society, even with the current status quo. And this is actually encouraged. Like you could argue Boy Scouts, they have a pretty good marketing team. They advertise Boy Scouts programs pretty well. They have a big reach too. A lot of people are in Boy Scouts. But again, that the moment we stop forcing people to do something, and I'm all for civic liberties and that we should be having the choice to do things. But if it's for the betterment of a nation, I think we can draw the line that this is something that should be mandated. And like I said, for Boy Scouts and schooling system, we've already seen that this hasn't actually led to that desired goal. Which in this case, the desired goal would be, reach helping America's youth reach a desired standard. And I think the only way in which we can reach that goal, which would obviously cascade into a myriad of benefits, is through mandating military service. But you said you did have another point that you wanted to
Yeah.
bring up. So
Yeah. So my other argument for why mandatory national service is actually harmful to the nation as a whole is because it would significantly harm the U.S. economy. The U.S. workforce has fewer people in it now than ever. According to a study from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 1989, 77.5% of young people aged 16 through 24 were in the workforce. In 2000, that percentage was 71%, so down 6. In 2024, that percentage is down to 60%. That's a 22% decrease in youth participation from 1989 to 2024. And it's even bigger in men. In 1989, 82% of men aged 16 through 24 were in the workforce, while in 2024, only 61% are. So that's a big issue, and forcing people to go into the military or into national service is only going to hurt that number. That's going to hurt the number of people in the workforce outside of mandatory. Because if you start something in high school, start working, and then continue during college or continue after college or not even go to college and just continue in your career, you're not going to be able to do that as easily if you have to take 1 to 2 years break of national service, which that's the usual for most countries that require it. After high school, you're going to have a break there. And then if you go to college, you've been out of it for 6 years. You're in that career. It's a lot harder to get back into that. And then same with college. You don't get a start there. So that pushes people back. And let's do a couple hypotheticals. Or before we do that, I got a chart that shows the data I just showed. Mm-hmm. You can have Exhibit A.
Wow, Jake. This is a really convincing graph.
Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I wrote that note on the bottom of the graph.
Okay.
But yeah, so let's think about it, right? So today, assume most people graduate at 18 and then go to college to get a bachelor's degree. That most will go to college for 4 to 5 years. So they'll be 22 to 23 by the time they enter the workforce. If we force people to do 2 years of national service, they'll be 24 to 25 by the time they enter the workforce. That's a big setback. You're almost 30 at that point. Yeah. Well, you're halfway to 30. And according to the U.S. Congressional Office, or CBO, entering the workforce currently, even just a year late, leads to significant lifetime earning losses. In 2018, the University of Chicago found that countries that require mandatory service reduce the lifetime earnings of their citizens on average by 3 to 5%. So when individuals enter the workforce later, and when individuals do worse, that is when the whole economy suffers. Because when we have young people under the age of 35, they make up a huge chunk of the economy per person. And so the higher you get in age, the less and less people are in the workforce. And so when we start it late and people get in late, they cut off a lot of years of their highest earning potential, and that really hurts the economy.
Yeah, those are some good points. I'll respond to that shortly and then get to the second point, which is a second point of today's contention, because we don't want to be stuck on how it impacts society for the entire debate or discussion. So about I think what you did bring up was a very, well thought out, well constructed case. We have less Americans. It's very easy to follow too. It's less Americans in the workforce. Obviously, reaps less spending, reaps a myriad of issues for the U.S. economy. I think a very crucial caveat for national service. I think that's something that is pretty important, and I obviously haven't done too much research into that specific idea, but. A lot of people, when they do national service, they get free or subsidized college. And when you have a bachelor's degree or some sort of college education, you tend to be more skilled or well-versed for a more increased number of jobs. And when you get into high-paying jobs, it is actually really good for the economy. When you have more Americans who are, less Americans who are unemployed, more Americans who are actually working, because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, if we did some calculations, we would see that this does have, obviously, for that 1 year gap where Americans are going to be in the military, it's going to have a considerable impact in that 1 year. But I think you'll notice that that more Americans are actually going to join the workforce at a later age and continue staying in the workforce for a longer period of time because they have either a college degree or they have some sort of a civic role, and they feel like they actually have to engage themselves, because a lot of people, they go straight out of college, they drop out, and they're unemployed, And I think this sort of solves that problem, and it prevents people from actually getting into that unemployment path. And when you have the trade-off of people who are unemployed and you put them to national service, you incentivize them to actually work towards a broader career ambition, which might be, a high-paying job or a job in general. I think that's something which I think we could both agree on is good for the economy if more Americans are working. But anyways, I do want to go to the second topic of contention today, which is that national service impacts the individual. And I will again kick us off with my main points, and then Jake can respond, and we can have a little bit of a discussion. So I think that national service provides you with a myriad of skills, and when you go to national service, like we were already kind of talking about, you become more incentivized to reach a particular military goal, whether that be physical fitness or education. And actually, a 2024 Quarterly Journal of Economic Study said that longer service increased longevity, so life expectancy, lifetime earnings, health status, geographic mobility, and labor, actually. More people are working too. So those are all really good points, because I think as more people, when you actually implement national service in a right manner, national service is a massive human capital accelerator. It gets a lot more people to be actually working towards a shared cause. And AmeriCorps budget justification evidence said that national service often resulted in improved access to education, work experience, and career pathways for members. And the 2023 State of the Evidence highlights that AmeriCorps participation improves job skills, leadership, employment outcomes, specifically for young adults and those with barriers to work. So like I mentioned, it does prevent a lot of people from going down that unemployment rabbit hole, and prevents them from actually, leading a life which is not necessarily ideal from an economic standpoint. They are incentivized to pick up certain skills, pick up certain leadership capabilities, the physical fitness to actually work and work at a 9 to 5 or whatever that might be, and actually have an earning. And I think that's obviously a really good thing. We want more people to be working for human capital reasons. And the more and more people, the more and more workers we have, the more transformative our economy gets. And as I've shown with the Quarterly Journal of Economic Study and the AmeriCorps evidence, that actually demonstrates that more and more people are actually going to be work towards that shared cause. Additionally, national service could be basically a publicly funded gap year of training that sort of boosts human capital and earnings, and more people who are actually gap years, they do have a negative connotation sometimes, depending on the way it is, but this is actually a gap year that's going towards something that is a beneficial cause. This narrows opportunity gaps, puts everyone sort of at a equal standpoint, which you can argue is bad in its own ways. But if you have everyone who actually has an equal standpoint, then everyone can work their way up, because everyone already has a base set of skills. They've already worked in the military. They have survival skills. They have leadership skills. They have communication skills. These are all things that are the soft skills that are really important. Moreover, service, statistically, it builds a sense of purpose. Like we mentioned with civic identity, when you have more and more people who actually have faith in the government, there's actually public health research that shows that volunteering and community involvement and things like civic engagement at a local level that are associated with better mental, physical, emotional health. And they could be recognized as vital for community well-being. So for the sake of a community and for the sake of an individual, it's pretty imperative that service, whatever that might be, it builds a sense of purpose and it improves the well-being of constituents. And so at the micro level, with the individual level, people sort of gain sense of purpose and psychological health, which we both know reaches a variety of positive impacts. So at the macro level, what that would do is it would create a shared civic identity among Americans and be more engaged in being an American and whatever that might be. So that is sort of my point. I have 2 points just for you to sort of remember what I was talking about. The 2 points that I brought up were human capital. Everyone's going to have the skills, the training, the resources to sort of build up. And the number 2 was that everyone's going to be sort of civically engaged.
All right. All right, I'll get cracking on that then.
All right.
I would say I found disagree in data. According to the CSIFO in Germany, they show that for 22, they said, quote, "We show that for 22 OECD countries since the 1960s, the intensity with which military conscription is enforced has a statistically significantly negative impact on the acquiring of post-secondary education. Their study shows that when OECD countries remove conscription, they can expect an 18 to 15% increase in young people entering higher education." That's when they remove conscription. So even though
Did it die?
the camera died, okay, we're gonna.
Do you know how long it died ago, or just like right now?
I just saw it turn off.
Okay.
So yeah, I can concede how the mandatory national service would help people enter the workforce in certain ways, but my data here shows that military conscription specifically doesn't actually lead to an increase in people entering higher education and getting higher paying jobs usually. But even if mandatory national service helps the economy and helps people join in the economy, a lot of things would help us incentivize people to join the economy. We could subsidize a lot of different things. We could subsidize certain types of income, subsidize people moving to places where they can get better jobs. We do that in certain cases in some ways. We could subsidize a lot, right? We could do a lot of different programs. We could subsidize the Boy Scouts to give people leadership roles. And you talk about how people would, in the military specifically, they would get roles and skills that they can use in the workforce, like leadership and all that stuff. Yes, they get survival skills in the military more than they would get in pretty much any other job. But they wouldn't get as much critical thinking skills in certain ways. They wouldn't get as much, they wouldn't learn how to advocate for themselves as much, because in the military you're not pitching why you should be promoted or why you should get certain things. And they do in the military, but not as much as you would in an office job or in a commission-based job. They don't learn sales. They don't learn a lot of things. And the stuff that they do learn, some of it, yes, the military is the best way to learn it. But for a lot of it, my thesis here would be that they can get it in other ways that they could get it to roughly the same extent or more, and other ways that are either easier to implement or don't cost the American government as much money. Because forcing people into a lot of the national service, that might not be the best for everybody, right? And so a lot of people might work better they might learn these skills better at working on a car dealership, where they work commission based and they get experience in sales and advocating for themselves, and they learn time management and they do all that stuff there. Other people might learn it better working at a school or working at a nonprofit, starting a nonprofit. People might learn it better there. And so national service, whether it's like community work or military, it's very expensive for the U.S. to implement, and there's probably better ways that we can give people these skills without costing so much money and without having to implement all this, because it would be a very challenging effort.
All right. Great points, Jake. First thing that you said was that military specifically does not necessarily equip people with the skills to actually join the workforce, whereas I was talking about service and you're saying basically military specific, like that one example doesn't necessarily do it.
Well,
but
it does, but there might be other ways that do it better,
to do it,
or to the same extent.
Yeah. But I would actually argue, actually you were sort of talking about that point too, but military service can give you some certifications like performing CPR, construction, EMT, teaching assistant, things like that. These are all things that military service can give you, plus an education award. These are all things that obviously help you when you're putting things on a resume and applying for jobs. You also said that it's a low benefit for its cost, and there's probably better ways in which we can spend this money. To which I agree with that point. And I could argue that, if we start at a younger age with a program like Boy Scouts and make it a little bit more nationally intensive, more and more people could actually have the exact same benefits with something that doesn't necessarily cost as much. If you create like organizations and nonprofits, that's great, yeah. But I think having a federal program sort of sets a precedent that the American government is actually engaged in the welfare of its citizens. Whereas if you have corporations that, like the Boy Scouts, which are focused on things like this, those programs already exist, even though they might not be reaching the number of constituents that we want them to, which is basically the entirety of America's youth. I think having the government involved in certain things like national service sets a really good precedent for other countries to follow, but not just other countries to follow, for future governance, that the American government cares about the welfare of its citizens. And we're not risking the lives of everyday Americans. We don't have to send them into active combat. That's up to you. We just want you to be serving the country, and that could be community service as well, which is obviously not really risky, and it helps people a lot. So with the cost, I'm going to be talking about the feasibility in a little bit, so we can do a little bit more diving deeper into like the feasibility of this and cost benefit analysis, and exactly seeing how much of a trade-off we are going to be putting into other government programs if we're going to be implementing something like this, because we want to make sure we're not taking money away from things that are perhaps more important. So we'll do a little bit more of a deeper dive into that in just a bit, but I think just in general, I think this is one of those things in which the government should actually get involved, and we shouldn't be focusing on like organizations, nonprofits, corporations, things like that to be working on them, because who knows how well a corporation can mandate something. It would require a lot of like government, subsidies and things like that, because it's a really hard thing for like a corporation. And if you can think about like any other aspect of your life, which there's an organization that completely has created a monopoly over, it's pretty hard to think about that. So I just don't understand the feasibility of how like Boy Scouts could get every single one of America's youth without being a government sponsored program, which is what we're basically talking about.
No, I mean, it wouldn't get every single one. Yeah. And there's a difference between mandatory national service in the way that most countries do it, where they force people to go into government programs like the military or into government service projects and domestically. But there's plenty of ways, and you talked about how the American government should be active in supporting the welfare of its citizens. There are ways that the American government can very much actively support its citizens without having to be so hands-on and controlling, because really, do we trust the government to run a program for all citizens?
Well, that's the point. We're trying to get more people to trust the government.
But do we trust the government by just forcing people to be a part of it? A better example of how the government very much actively supports its citizens without running things itself would be look no further than one of the most prevalent parts of the New Deal was FDIC insurance. That's where the government, for select banks, backs them and says, if this bank fails, we personally guarantee that everyone who had money in it, we will give them back their money. That was how they stabilized the banks after the Great Depression and the stock fall and all that stuff. But FDIC protections are still around today. And not any bank can just become FDIC insured. They have to follow federal regulations and certain stricter regulations than if they weren't insured. And they're required to do a lot of things with that they wouldn't otherwise be required to do. But that's a great way that the federal government supports Americans without being controlling, right? And without being too hands-on. If we said, okay, we don't want them to just support the Boy Scouts for national service, we're going to create the America Scouts, and it's just Boy Scouts, but the federal government runs it, and they own it, right? Why would the federal government be better at running it than the Boy Scouts? Why would they be better at running replace Boy Scouts with some other service program? Why would the federal government be better at it, and why do we want them to do it? That just creates more bloat. It creates a bigger government that is not really governing. It's just extra parts of it that really shouldn't be there. So we could look how the federal government supports the FDIC. They're involved in the banks, but they're not involved in American life unless we need it. But they're always there in case of it, and it really supports Americans. FDIC insurance is huge for Americans who work with banks that collapse, and during recessions, that is a huge thing that really, really helps a lot of Americans. So that's a way that the government can actively support us without trying to be better at doing things than people who have careers in it.
Yeah. And those are some good points. Just to sort of end this all out, because what I'm seeing right now is a lot of like hints at feasibility points, and I do want to bring that up in our third topic of discussion today, which is about like cost benefit analysis and all that stuff, where we can actually sort of hone in on like the numbers and the analytics of how good this program can work. I do want to sort of summarize this, that national service is sort of a mechanism for distributive justice, because number one, because everyone has to serve, we have this sort of burden sharing where everyone has to do the same thing. Number two, everyone gets access to the same training, the same educational support, the same social support, and the same stipends. So that's opportunity sharing. So we have both burden sharing and opportunity sharing. So everyone's sort of at an equal footing when it comes to entering the real world. So that's why I think it's sort of a mechanism of distributive justice. And I do want to actually respond to some of your points about like how well national government can respond to these things. So if you have nothing else to sort of talk about, then we can move on to number 3. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, let me add one more thing to my
All right. Go for it.
Was basically like a conclusion was just that like subsidizing Boy Scouts and other Girl Scouts, Cookie Scouts, or brownies. That's like the junior version of Girl Scouts, and Cub Scouts are like the junior version of Boy Scouts. And subsidizing other programs, whether it's a nonprofit or a church or something like that, that would be a way to get the to fill in the national service benefits.
Yeah.
I was insinuating that the whole time. I don't believe I like said it out.
No,
right?
yeah, that made it more clear, of course, to all our listeners. But yeah, I do sort of want to talk about, sort of in a rhetorical lens, how would we subsidize all these programs, and how much money would it cost? Do you know?
I don't know, but I mean, just to require mandatory military service, estimates put it over $100 billion a year, if not more, and that's almost a fifth of the current budget.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I mean, there's ways that we can do a lot less, and then especially if we kick it to the states and have the states governments do it, we could increase the value for the money that we get. I don't have notes on exactly how we could implement it into exactly what, because I was focusing most on other stuff, and I'm just freeballing, responding to your points. But
yeah, no, of course, yeah.
But like, I don't know, Boy Scouts, and I mean, we look at schools, right? Our school district provides free and heavily discounted schooling to adults as a part of a welfare program, or I don't know if it's technically welfare, but public benefit beyond the students, and that's government subsidized. I'm not sure exactly what, whether it's state or federal or what department subsidizes it, but the money comes from the government in some way. So stuff like that. There's a lot of, we don't need to reinvent the wheel to help our citizens. We don't need mandatory national service to in like a big federal way to support our citizens. We can go to a lot of churches in any metropolitan area. There's a ton of churches, synagogues, mosques, nonprofits of other kinds that are offering free English lessons, free math lessons, free parental lessons. New parents, they need to learn how to do stuff. Even stuff like AA and all the other, and those other support organizations for people. Yeah. A lot of them struggle from lack of funding, but they have the personnel and the skills to grow. They just don't have the funding for it. So the government helps those places, those organizations, and like you look at the schools that offer free lessons and free courses for parents of students there. They already have the teachers and the expertise to do it. They just didn't have the funding. So when they get federal funding, then they can offer for free or for heavily subsidized to the parents. So that's the thing. We would want to, instead of having the government reinvent the wheel to try and support the citizens, we should empower people who are already supporting them and already have the skills to empower them to do it more.
Mm-hmm. But do we have anything that sort of, like, when you talk about, English programs at temples or churches, synagogues, things like that, that is sort of like a substitute for something that could be, federally funded or a federal program. In this case, we're talking about service, military service. It might not be military service, non-military service too, but service in general. I don't know if we have a better alternative right now, something that is locally run or run by an organization which needs subsidies to do something like this.
No, we don't. Like we're both talking in hypothetical futures here.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Right? Like the conscription is a hypothetical. The way that we're talking about it, mandatory national service is a hypothetical future. The way I'm talking about it is a hypothetical future as well. Yours is based on what we already have in community and military work. And I'm talking about what we already have in nonprofit schools, etc.
Yeah.
We don't have an equivalent to mandatory national service in what I'm talking about yet. But if we put what we're talking about basically boils down to funding, right? Mm-hmm. Whether which way do we want to go? I'm saying if we did my way, then the better way, it would yield better results and yield acceptable results cheaper.
Okay, let's move on to the feasibility.
Yeah, we're kind of sliding into that already, but yeah,
we are. Yeah, I want to formally slide into that right now.
Okay.
So our third main topic of contention or topic of discourse today is feasibility and implementation of such an endeavor. And let's first start talking about the costs. And actually, Jake gave us a little bit of a sneak peek, and we have a common number for once we actually have something that's the same, where it would probably cost a little bit more than $100 billion a year, according to estimates by the U.S. Naval Institute.
I have those as well.
Yeah, mandatory national service. However, there is some cost-benefit analyses of national service estimates that say that social benefit cost ratios would amount to about 4-1. So if we're doing the math correctly, that's about $400 billion reaped in benefit when we actually create such a program. So when you expand civilian national service to about, this estimate says about 250,000 young people annually, the moment you enlist that many young people every year, you get social benefit cost ratios of 4-1. So that obviously, from a pure economic standpoint, it seems to be enough to make a claim that national service is a good trade-off, and for cost-benefit analysis standpoint as well. Additionally, what else is it? Oh yeah, additionally, we have existing infrastructure that have worked. So going back to your point about the New Deal and New Deal programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is also signed into effect by the New Deal, the CCC, it's scaled to employ about 3 million young men between 1933 and 1942, coordinated through federal agencies sponsored by the government, and military-style camps. And what this was able to do was obviously create a ramification of positive impacts where we created this brand new system where a lot of Americans were now enlisted into this large-scale project, and that is very beneficial. But that is an example of a government program that's actually worked, where we took implementation from the federal government, we took it to a level that was sort of organized and well thought out. And the CCC was thus able to employ 3 million young Americans when they were trying to figure out how to rebound after the Great Recession. Or the Depression, my bad. Additionally, for legal feasibility, mandatory national service, including conscription, is constitutionally allowed and historically accepted. In Rosker versus Goldberg, a 1981 Supreme Court case, they upheld the constitutionality of mail-only draft registration, saying that Congress acted within its constitutional authority to raise and support armies. So the holding rests on, and in general, the holding rests on Congress's broad Article 1 war powers, which say that the legitimacy of conscription itself is completely valid, and we can conscript a national service army. But challenges right now focus more on gender discrimination, which in today's world that could be a bigger debate. But the feasibility of implementation from a legal standpoint and a constitutional standpoint is completely valid right now. So another one for fiscal feasibility, and go back to the money again. Sorry, this was a little bit not really well thought out. So I went from fiscal feasibility to legal feasibility back to fiscal feasibility.
It's all good. I forgive you.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. So Brookings estimates that expanding national service to about 250,000 positions, which is the exact same sweet spot number I gave earlier, 250K, that annually could cost roughly $5 billion a year. So a huge number shot down from the $100 billion number that we were talking about. And a Voices for National Service economic analysis notes that current funding is under $1 billion. That expansion yields benefit cost ratios, like I mentioned, between 3.9 to 4.6, meaning society gets about $4 to $5 of benefit per dollar spent through higher earnings, tax revenues, community impact. These are all ways in which we receive a lot of money. So hopefully that was a little bit clear. I think I was going all over the place. But from a macro context, again, the U.S. defense spending budget's almost $1 trillion annually, so that's a lot of money we spend on that. Slightly increasing spending from $1 billion to $5 billion from $1 trillion huge number from defense spending. It's infinitesimal in comparison to what we have right now.
Is that a word?
It's a word. Oh, tiny. It's really tiny.
Learned a new word today.
Yeah. So reallocating overall spending for something like this, it's not an aggressive proposal at all. It's really feasible because we spent a lot of money on the defense budget alone. So, yeah.
So I got kind of three things to say here.
Right.
I guess responding to that. I'll start off with the legal, responding to your legal point of that it's constitutional. It is. I couldn't find something that was arguments against that were worthwhile to say here, but that doesn't mean that anyone who's listening, who's in speech and debate, and you are arguing the neg side of this resolution, try your best to find a counter to that. I couldn't find it here, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Just because I couldn't find it doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. And then I have a clarification question for you. You said that we scaled to 3 million people involved before. That
was part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is a New Deal program.
Okay. What years were that?
1933 to 1942.
Okay. That was when it first started. So I don't have data on that, but I would think that didn't last as long. I don't know.
That was meant to just rebound from the Depression, it's a rebound.
But it still exists today.
Yeah.
But I would say that we don't actually have the capability to expand rapidly, like what you were saying for a lot of your point there. The U.S. would need hundreds of thousands of new administrative staff, new training facilities, billions in new housing equipment, logistics, to increase mass conscription. We would need a bunch of housing equipment and the other stuff. If we want to increase volunteering, we would need a lot of, maybe not new housing. Depend. If we're going to send people to remote areas to work on projects, we wouldn't need housing, but we would mainly need billions for equipment, logistics, salaries, all of that. Currently, AmeriCorps, which is a U.S. government program that connects, I believe it's mainly military people with volunteer stuff. But I don't know if it's just military, but I believe it's mainly military or ex-military people. It connects people with volunteering opportunities. It currently has 75,000 members. It's one of our biggest programs for that. And it constantly faces consistent staffing and funding shortages according to the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, audits. Scaling something like that, or AmeriCorps specifically, to 4 million 18-year-olds per year is logistically near impossible without massive government expansion. It would cost You brought up the Naval Institute thing that said roughly 132 billion per year to maintain conscription specifically. I would like to point out that I looked at that article specifically as well, and I got that. That is from a commentary article by there. So it's an editorial from the Naval Institute. So it's not necessarily an endorsed number by them. So just for anyone that's might want to use that for a debate, for the speech and debate, NSDA, just be careful and make sure that you fact check their numbers and go deeper. But nevertheless, he had good enough evidence for our purposes, so we can use it. 132 billion is a lot just for conscription, and we're gonna have a lot of other expenses and other things that we need to get past to do conscription, volunteering, all of that. And if AmeriCorps is already struggling, what are we? How are we going to realistically do that for everyone else? I'm going to search something real quick here. Does AmeriCorps only work with military personnel? No, it's open to all U.S. citizens. So I was wrong about that earlier. AmeriCorps works with all U.S. citizens. So we got 75,000 members in AmeriCorps, and it's already struggling. So scaling that to 4 million, struggling with AmeriCorps, that's not a funding is not going to solve that. If they're already struggling, there's a difference between struggling with staffing and funding. They are struggling with funding shortages, but if you're struggling already, extra funding is not going to help that. If you are just unable to expand, extra funding will help that, and so that's the difference there.
Yeah, but we're talking about specifically scaling it, not necessarily adding additional money to it.
But how would it scale without additional money?
Like, it would obviously need additional money, but we're also making it a more robust program. So that would make a larger program for AmeriCorps.
But that all requires funding.
It does require funding, right? Yeah.
So funding is the underlying.
Yeah, we do need funding, but you said that funding is not necessarily going to rebound the problem that AmeriCorps faces, and I'm saying that it actually will, because as we create a bigger program, then it says that we'll reap that 4-to-1 benefit cost ratio. So we're not only talking about just adding money to it. We have a specific targeted guideline as to where we're adding money and exactly how it's going to help. So yeah, it is understaffed right now, but depending on where we put that money towards, we can help address some of the bigger underlying issues.
But wouldn't there be I'll segue into it. Do you have more that you want to talk about that specific?
Yeah, I do want to mention that. So we talked about historical feasibility. We talked about legal feasibility, constitutional feasibility. We also talked about potentially fiscal feasibility too. We did some cost-benefit analysis, which take it your way. I don't have a lot of numbers to respond to what Jake just mentioned, so I'm going to move on. Let's talk about social feasibility. So in today's day and age, you rarely see something so agreed up. Yeah.
Before we go into social, I guess
what's up?
My other argument works more for the fiscal. So
okay, let's go back to fiscal. Yeah.
My other contention for this area of discussion is that the military specifically doesn't want or need millions of conscripts. They've repeatedly said. Former Defense Secretary James Mattis and current Pentagon statements affirm that conscription is not aligned with modern military needs. That's backed up by independent organizations such as the Heritage Foundation as well. The U.S. military is currently strategically downsizing in many areas and shifting towards high-tech roles requiring years of training. That's what conscripts would not fix. And I referenced this, I believe, in the first area of discussion that we talked about, that the military is strategically downsizing. Conscripts are not useful for cyber intelligence engineering or drone warfare. very rapidly, America has gone away from the days, the whole world really, but America specifically has gone away from the days of large ground-based assaults. Now we're relying more on drones, missiles, all that stuff. Just like back in the day, we used to build giant cannons and turrets on shores to keep away battleships, like we did during Civil War time.
Right.
We don't build those anymore because by the time a ship is within range of a cannon on the shore, a missile could have taken them out way earlier, and they would have never even seen a cannon. So that works the same for conscripts and just soldiers. And so the military doesn't want that because conscripts, they're not going to be very useful for the new type of advanced warfare that we're going into because it requires years of training for a lot of it. So the military doesn't want it, and it's just going to become big and bloated, and they don't want it, they don't need it. We shouldn't waste our money on that. It's not feasible to expect the government and the military to accept that, and we're just going to be burning money, and so fiscally that's irresponsible. And that's going to apply to a lot of different things. The Civilian Conservation Corps, more and more of their jobs can be replaced by computers. Strategic planning, analytical stuff, that can be replaced by computers. People hiking into remote sections of the forest to check on things, that can be replaced by drones now. So a lot of these national service opportunities that were historically available to us are more and more moving away from just short-term volunteers. They're moving to less amount of people and more trained people.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some good points. And of course, we, in certain aspects, I would agree that the military is, of course, downsizing. But that doesn't represent the full story. And actually, I think in many aspects, the military is actually looking for new prospects because right now the military is employing 1.3 million active personnel. And in addition to 1.3 million active personnel, 800K reserves. So over 2.1 million people are serving the military right now. So that's a lot of people. And they need them for a variety of manpower tasks. This could be also like wildfire containment. This could be hurricane containment. This could be elder care, infrastructure repair, and climate resilience, national parks, things like that. These are all ways in which service would actually benefit society in a sense that these things cannot necessarily be automated. Maybe 10, 15 years down the future, we'll notice that a lot of these things also become automated. But right now, I don't know about, drones taking away firefighting roles, things like that.
But they do already because...
Yeah, potentially.
We have people flying planes, dropping in fire retardant down water.
Yeah.
More and more of that's being replaced by drones.
Yeah, potentially. Like, again, I don't know the numbers for that, but I think there's a lot of ways, and like I mentioned, actually military conscriptions are currently rising. They're downsizing in certain aspects, but overall the picture is still increasing. They're still looking for more and more troops. Like I mentioned, 2.1 million people are being annually recruited for military purposes. That's a lot of people, a lot of manpower that needs to be filled in for these military jobs. So I think... there's obviously going to be a lot of ways in which we do need to automate things because we are, as a technologically advanced society, we're moving forwards. We're not going to be using, horses in today's society. We're not going to use full scale artillery in majority of conflicts. So, from a pure war standpoint, I think it does make sense that we're obviously going to need to automate a lot of tasks, but there's a lot of things in which human power is still necessary. And there might come time where those things also become automated, and there we would have to debate from a different lens, and that wouldn't be necessarily fiscal feasibility. That would be more so do we even need military at that point if everything can be automated by drones and
Yeah, but I see what you're saying there. We definitely still need manpower. Like if we're gonna go repair a bridge, we definitely need people to go repair the bridge.
Yeah, but
as people get more training, we can cut down on the amount of people there because people work more efficiently. And if we need to send a park ranger somewhere, we used to have a big office with a bunch of secretaries for I don't know, pick a national park. I don't know, Yosemite. We used to have a big old office with a bunch of secretaries, and they call each of the park rangers and they say, oh, we need you to go there, here, do this and this and this. They have people call back. They go, oh, yeah, but now a lot of that's automated. The system tells people where to go. Used to be back in the day, if a park ranger, something happened, had to file an incident report, files the report, turns it in. A person sorts it, goes through it, checks it, does all of that. And now a computer does most of it. So we've cut down on the amount of support roles. And that's where we get a lot of it. So the vast majority of military roles and jobs you talked about, like the 2.2 million, including reserves, are not soldiers, like frontline soldiers. A lot of them are support staff. And the more support staff that we have, the more bloated we are, because as we increase in technology, we can cut down on a lot of that. So even if we still have conscription going up in certain areas right now, in a lot of areas it's the quotas are going down and are going to go down significantly in the coming years.
Yeah, and I actually do want to sort of talk about how if we do automate certain things, we actually, in those respects, might need more manpower because, for example, cybersecurity and, surveillance, things like that. Modern warfare, from a huge standpoint, there's a lot of people that need to maintain it, a lot of technical specialists. And from many ways in which you could look at this, more and more people are going to be drafted at the role of not really going to the front lines because we have a lot of technology going there and doing stuff for us. Like you mentioned, like a lot of aspects of society have already been replaced by things that are a lot more efficient. But to run those things that are more efficient, we need people who are actually smart. And that is where enlisting the general populace, because if you just have a select few population, like generally we're not going to get as many highly intellectual people running these programs. If we mandate something, we can always get the best talent pool for specific roles. And people always have their own niches. Different people are good at different things. I'm probably good at something that you're not good at, and you're good at something that I'm not good at. So, and depending on what it might be, we each have our own specialties. And especially in today's day and age, we need a lot of technical specialists to be running modern warfare systems, which are very computationally expensive. So, and I can't list every single type of modern warfare technology which would need manpower, but I can presume, like, in addition to cybersecurity, you need to figure out how to, like, do this AI tracking systems and electronic surveillance, things like that. That would obviously require a lot of people to run and maintain those programs. But I did promise I was going to talk about one more thing, which is social feasibility and political feasibility, because you don't regularly see things in today's day and age that are argued or that are agreed upon by both sides of the political aisle, both the Democrats and Republicans, who maintain this sort of legislative stronghold. However, service can be framed from both a conservative lens, which would be patriotism and national identity and partisanship, shared duty, things like that. And it can also be framed from a progressive lens as well, which could be, equality, opportunity, civic engagement. These are all ways in which the Democrats might argue it. So it can be argued from both sides of support. And actually, from more than just a hypothetical, this has actually been reinforced by Brookings and Service Airlines, who said that, or actually not Brookings, but Service Airlines said that this could make service, a common expectation service would make it a unifying bipartisan project. And it would be very easy to it would be very feasible to implement something like this because it would reach both unanimous support, because it can be framed from both lenses, of course. I did want to make this more clear because I've been sort of jumping around this point so much, and I don't think I've really clearly reinforced what I was saying. But service requires a lot of things which do actually require a lot of manpower. It's not just military. It could also be education, public health, conservation, running our national parks, running elder care, running infrastructure projects, running disaster response roles for like hurricanes or floods, forest fires, which we as Californians, we have to face those every year. So we do know that, scaling up scaling up service, not necessarily military service, reaps a myriad of benefits. And there's many ways in which we could generate that through increased participation in civic roles, civic duties, through these many things which are obviously very societally beneficial. I could name them again if you'd like, but
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have specific data to refute that, but I would say with like elder care and firefighting and all that stuff, I would say there's still, again, I won't talk in nauseam anymore about the automation stuff, even though you could use that to respond to this, but I won't just talk because we talked about it a lot already. But like with the social ability, yeah, I can see how that works in paper in theory, but a lot of America is lazy, and a lot of people wouldn't agree, right, on things because we see it now. We see like budget. Both sides of the political aisle agree, yeah, we probably shouldn't be $36 trillion in debt. Probably shouldn't be. And yet they can't agree on how to cut down on it. They can't agree on what we should fund, what we shouldn't fund. This is a big funding thing. Funding is pretty much the biggest issue for Congress to agree on, right? A lot of the things boil down to funding, like education, all that stuff. Yeah, talk about a lot of education, but it boils down to who's funding what, whether the states fund it or the federal government funds it. There's other parts to it, but that's what it boils down to a lot. So even though I see how it would seem that the political aisles could agree easily on that mandatory national service is a good idea, I see those arguments, and I'm not saying that they're 100% definitely wrong, but I don't think it's a good idea to be certain of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot that can change, a lot that can go differently, and funding is never a safe bet to assume that people will agree on funding.
Yeah, that's everything that I have. I agree with some of the points. Like, there's never any definitive way in which we can, DC has their own problems, and we don't know what they agree on, what they don't, and we can never definitively say they're going to agree on anything, especially something as hypothetically expansive as this is. So
this would be akin to the New Deal, almost.
Yeah,
well, maybe not quite, but
specific programs like the New Deal was really expensive.
If this was added in the New Deal, it would be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, program inside of it.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything else?
No, but if you want to close this out.
All right, yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. We were a little bit more prepared than last time, but I'm still obviously not as prepared as you guys should be for your Lincoln Douglas debates. Hopefully you guys got some key points of discussion, points of contention here. There's a lot of good points that we brought up, and I would obviously encourage, as for every single one of our episodes, for all the good points that you see, make sure that you're doing a lot more research on each of those good points so you can actually make it an effective, contention, because you don't want something that can be easily shot down.
Yeah, and this podcast is for you guys. It's not for us to just debate each other.
Right, yeah.
It's for people who are in speech and debate to learn about the resolutions that are currently active or could be active, and to help them debate.
Get a little bit of a surface cover of what's actually happening.
Maybe get some ideas for different arguments that you can use. So definitely use this as a resource, but like Yash said, do your own research to find your own evidence.
Right, and if you enjoy episodes like these, please subscribe and like these videos. That helps us a lot. Share it with your friends. And stay tuned for other informational videos, whether that be podcasts or educational channel videos, playlists. We're going to be offering a lot of upcoming episodes in the future. Yeah,
and this is presented by Future Speakers Initiative. The Future Speakers Initiative produces this podcast. We got the president right here.
Right.
It's a nonprofit, so
and a great guy, Jake, too.
It's a nonprofit, so it's all run on donations. We all run on donations. Yeah. So if you would like to support, go to futurespeakers.net and support the podcast there.
Yeah.
And all the other things that FSI does.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.